We often think of the British conquest of India as a story of gunpowder and glory, but the truth is far colder. The fate of a subcontinent wasn't decided on a battlefield. It was decided in a ledger, signed with a lie, and sealed with a handshake that would enslave a billion souls. In the mid-18th century, the province of Bengal was an economic titan. It was the engine of the global economy, a land where rivers didn't just carry water, they carried half of Asia's trade. From the silk weavers of Murshidabad to the shipbuilders of Kolkata, this was a kingdom where wealth was so immense. It was measured not in coins, but in caravans. Europe watched with envy, but where there is unimaginable wealth, there is always a shadow waiting to consume it. At the center of this golden age stood the young Nawab Suraj-ud-Dawla. He was barely 20, fiery, proud, and dangerously intolerant of corruption. He looked at the East India Company and saw them for what they truly were. Not simple merchants, but a private army in disguise, slowly fortifying their warehouses and weaponizing their trade. Suraj cracked down. He demanded taxes be paid. He demanded the British stop behaving like masters in a land where they were guests. But in doing so, he made a fatal error. He threatened the cash flow of the corrupt elite within his own court. Enter the conspirators. This was a triumvirate of greed that would doom a nation. First, there was Mir Jafar, the commander of the army, a man whose ambition had rotted into bitter resentment after being sidelined by the young Nawab. Then there was Jagat Seth, the banker of the world, a financier whose vault held more gold than the Bank of England. And finally, Omichund, the merchant who played both sides. Across the table sat Robert Clive. Clive was a soldier of fortune with the mind of a predator. He realized quickly that Bengal was too strong to be conquered by force. Its walls were too high, its cannons were too numerous. But Clive understood the one universal language that transcends borders: greed. He didn't need to invade Bengal, he simply needed to buy it. The deal was struck in the shadows. It was a contract of betrayal colder than any steel. The British promised Mir Jafar the throne. In exchange, Jafar promised to turn his army into statues when the war began. Jagat Seth financed the bribes, and the East India Company prepared to collect the ultimate return on investment. On June 23, 1757, the armies met at Plassey. The atmosphere was suffocating, the air thick with humidity and impending doom. On paper, it should have been a slaughter. Suraj-ud-Dawla commanded 50,000 men, war elephants, and heavy artillery. Robert Clive had barely 3,000 troops. But as the cannons roared and the monsoon rain began to lash the field, the tragedy unfolded. The Nawab ordered the advance, but his army did not move. Thousands of soldiers stood silent, their swords sheathed, their eyes averted. They were commanded by Mir Jafar, and he had already sold their honor. The British advanced, not through courage, but through a corridor of betrayal. Suraj-ud-Dawla, realizing the horror of what was happening, fled the field, his dynasty ending not with a bang, but with the quiet, crushing weight of a transaction completed. The aftermath was a looting spree that defies modern comprehension. When Clive entered the treasury of Murshidabad, he walked through rooms piled high with gold, jewels, and silver, wealth that had taken centuries to accumulate. The British loaded it onto boats and sent it down the river. In today's terms, billions of dollars were stripped from Bengal in a matter of days. This stolen capital didn't just enrich a company, it kickstarted the Industrial Revolution in Britain. The looms of Manchester were built on the broken backs of Bengal. And what of the traitor Mir Jafar? He got his throne. He wore the crown and sat in the palace. But he soon realized the terrible fine print of his deal. He was a king in name only. The East India Company presented him with bill after bill: reparations, fees, military costs. When he couldn't pay, they seized land. When the land ran out, they seized the revenue rights of the entire province. Mir Jafar watched helplessly as his country was bled dry. The once fertile fields turned into dust bowls. The bustling markets fell silent. Famine began to stalk the villages, claiming millions of lives, while the company's stock price soared in London. The man who had sold his country for power found himself the ruler of a graveyard. He died a broken man, his name, Mir Jafar, becoming a permanent synonym for Quisling, a label for the ultimate traitor. History is often taught as a series of dates and battles, but the lesson of Plassey is not military, it is moral. It teaches us that the most dangerous enemies are not the ones gathering at the gates, but the ones smiling at the dinner table. Empires rarely fall because they are weak, they fall because they are sold from within. 2 centuries of colonial rule, of famine, of struggle, all began with one man's decision to prioritize his own ambition over his people's freedom. Mir Jafar thought he was making a business deal. He didn't realize he was signing the death warrant of a civilization. In the end, Bengal's rivers still flow, and the monsoon rains still wash over the fields of Plassey. But if you listen closely to the wind, you can still hear the whisper of that ancient warning. A nation can survive its fools and even the ambitious, but it cannot survive treason from within.